available for viewing in the future. Some logistics before we begin. Due to the high attendance, everyone will remain muted for the duration of the webinar. Please enter your question into the Q&A box. We have time planned at the end of the webinar to answer any questions asked. Before we begin, a little bit about the presenter. Melanie Ross has over 20 years of experience in quality assurance, quality control, and quality management. She has worked in several different industries, including chemical, biological, oil and gas, as well as aerospace. Her main role in each one of those industries was the development of management systems, including internal audit programs, vendor qualification procedures, and implementation of Lean Six Sigma. Currently, Melanie is a technical products developer here at ANAB, designing and delivering training courses and supporting clients' outreach through business development activities. Her role serves as a technical resource to our customers, assessors, as well as other industry interested parties. And without further delay, Melanie, I am passing you the ball so you can begin.
All right, thank you. Okay, my controls just went away when you gave me the ball. All right, now they're back. Just took a second for WebEx. Thank you for the introduction, Natalia, and welcome everyone. Today, we're going to talk about cause analysis and corrective action. It's a pretty important topic. We've done webinars on it in the past. That's why we called this one Revisited, to go over some additional information that you may need for corrective action and cause analysis. So it's an important topic, not just to organizations that are certified or accredited, but it's also important to any organization that wants to improve their business operations and address problems that occur. Here are the key takeaways for this webinar. We'll review the standard requirements for cause analysis and corrective action from various standards to make sure that we have an understanding of those requirements. I'll present just a few of the key tools available for cause analysis, such as 5 whys, and then we'll discuss the importance of corrective action, more specifically effective corrective actions to eliminate the causes of nonconformities. And finally, we will discuss the relationship between cause analysis and risk-based thinking. So before we get into the requirements, let's talk about the definition of cause analysis and corrective action. The definition of cause analysis is a process used to define, evaluate, and systematically analyze a problem to determine the underlying factors or reasons for the problem. So let's look at some of the key words in the definition. First, there's systematically, which means according to a fixed plan or system or methodically. Next is analyze, which means examine methodically and in detail the structure of, typically for the purposes of explanation or interpretation. And then finally, we have factor, which is reason or cause. All of these used interchangeably to mean the same thing. One of the elements contributing to a result or situation. In other words, let's see. So what is cause analysis? It is the determination of a potential problem's underlying cause or causes. It's the process of identifying all causes that have or may have resulted in an undesirable condition, situation, nonconformity, or failure. It is an analytical technique used to determine the basic underlying reason that causes a variance, a defect, or a risk. Cause analysis is oftentimes not a direct path to corrective action, and that's why it's very important to understand the concept of cause analysis, as well as some of the tools and techniques that we're going to go over today in order to have an effective cause analysis program. So in the definition of cause analysis, it said to analyze a problem. So what is the problem? On the previous slide, I said several different words: variance, defect, risk, nonconformity. So all of these terms all mean the same thing when we're talking about cause analysis. In most of the standards that we use in management systems and conformity assessment, that term is considered nonconformity. Sometimes that word has such a negative connotation, though, that individuals want to avoid using that word. So we also see the words departure or discrepancy or error or mistake, and then similarly the non-compliance term there. So when we're thinking about cause analysis and corrective action, we can use the generic term, just the problem, but we can also define it further by saying it is a nonconformity. It's something that occurs that we don't want to occur, that has a negative impact to the organization. So now we'll look at the definition of corrective action. It is an action to eliminate the cause of a detected nonconformity. Corrective action is intended to fix the problem, so to speak, so that it does not occur again, and also so that it does not occur elsewhere in the organization. Effective corrective actions eliminate the causes that are identified in cause analysis so that the nonconformity or the problem does not occur again. It's important, again, to understand the concept of corrective action and how it relates to cause analysis in order to ensure that the actions taken are effective in eliminating that cause. So now we'll get into the standard requirements for corrective action. We're going to look at the requirements from ISO 9001 for quality management systems, ISO IEC 17025 for testing and calibration laboratories, and ISO IEC 17020 for inspection laboratories. Those are some of the more common standards that are used by organizations to develop and maintain their management and technical systems. For ISO 9001 and 17025, both standards start with when nonconformity occurs. Remember, nonconformity in the context of cause analysis is a problem. So the standard is saying whenever a problem occurs, then you must follow these requirements within the standard, which I will pull up here in a second. Sometimes it's easier to think of it that way rather than that ominous word again of nonconformity. When we're talking about a problem that needs to be resolved, oftentimes people are more amenable to wanting to assist, wanting to look at the reason. If we're saying it's non-compliance or non-conformity, again, that can have a negative connotation and may stymie or stifle the cause analysis efforts of the organization. So first, I'm going to pull up the requirements from ISO 9001. ISO 9001 was updated in 2015, and the management system requirements became less prescriptive. So the corrective action requirements are in section 10.2, and they're very simple. So the first thing when a nonconformity or a problem occurs is the organization needs to react to it. They need to understand that it occurred and take some sort of action towards that. They need to evaluate the need for action to eliminate the causes. So here, it's not specifically saying you need to identify the causes in this slide, but the standard does say that you need to determine the cause of the nonconformity as part of your reaction. You want to implement any action needed. And then here it's important to review the effectiveness of the actions, because the actions that we take, correction and corrective action, need to be targeted at that cause or causes in order to eliminate it so that it doesn't occur again. The next requirement is to update risks and opportunities, and we'll talk about that when we get into the relationship between corrective action and risk-based thinking. And then it requires you to make changes to the management system. So this is kind of makes sense. If you're having a problem that's occurring, you need to make changes to your management system, update documents, provide training, that sort of thing. And then, as all of us that are familiar with ISO standards, if you don't have documented information or a record retained, it didn't happen. So you have to retain documented information related to the nonconformity or the problem, the cause, and the actions that were taken. Now I'm going to pull up the requirements from ISO IEC 17025 2017. This standard was updated in 2017 to reflect the exact same requirements of the 9001 standard, just in a different section, in 8.7 instead of 10.2. So that you can see they're exactly the same. This is intentional. When the 17025 or the 2017 edition of the 17025 standard was created, it was created to mimic the management system requirements of 9001. And that's because many organizations have 9001 certification for their management system, their operations, and then they layer on that 17025 accreditation for their testing and calibration activities. Having the management system requirements the same in both standards makes it easier to have an integrated management system that covers both of the standards. So there's not additional requirements in 17025. For testing and calibration laboratories, they still have to react to the nonconformity and evaluate needed actions to eliminate the causes, and then again, retain that documented information. Now, when we get to the 17020 standard, it's going to look a little different, and I'll explain why. So for 17020, this standard was last released in 2012. That was before the rewrite of the ISO 9001 standard. So the management system requirements of 17020 are still the prescriptive requirements that used to be in the 9001 standard. So 17020 for inspection bodies requires the establishment of a procedure for identification and management of nonconformities. And as with the other two standards, the organization must take actions to eliminate the causes of the nonconformities in order to prevent recurrence. So it is still the same, but you have to consider for 17020, it requires a procedure. That wasn't the case for 9001 and 17025. The 17020 standard goes on to list out specific requirements for the procedure, including identifying the nonconformity, determining the causes, correcting the nonconformity, evaluating the need for action, determining the actions needed and implementing them in a timely manner, recording the results of the actions taken, and reviewing the effectiveness of the actions taken. That should sound familiar. Those are all the requirements in 9001 and 17025. 17020 just requires it in a procedure. 17020 also has a clause 8.8 for preventive actions. So the preventive action section of the other two standards was removed for that risk-based thinking concept. So you need to be aware of this if 17020 is a part of your management system. There are additional requirements that would need to be in place if you had 9001 and 17020 in order to establish your corrective action program. So now that we've gone over the requirements of the standard, why do we perform cause analysis? I've kind of alluded to it a couple of times, but what's really the point? Cause analysis is the starting point of any corrective action investigation. Once a nonconformity or problem is identified, cause analysis is used to determine the actions that will be needed to react to the nonconformity. We want to prevent recurrence of the problem. No one wants to deal with the same problem over and over again. Not only does it waste time, but it can waste money as well. And additionally, cause analysis aids in preventing problems from occurring elsewhere in the organization. So you think about it, there's a problem or a nonconformity in one area of the organization, and it's not addressed. It could very well occur elsewhere in the organization. And if you don't have a comprehensive cause analysis and corrective action program, then it may not even be the other area of the organization may not even know that there was a problem that was addressed or not addressed. So that's the main reason that we want to perform effective cause analysis. Another reason that we perform cause analysis is the suitability of a corrective action cannot be determined without an identified cause. So what that means here is if a problem happens and we just do a quote unquote knee-jerk reaction and place a band-aid on it, so to speak, then how do we know that we've really solved that problem permanently? If we don't know why the problem happened, we don't know how to fix it. So you need to identify and implement the corrective actions that will most likely correct the problem again and prevent recurrence. So you're not able to do that unless you know why the problem happened. We'll get in a little bit further about the depth of the cause analysis here in a minute. So we'll talk about some of the cause analysis tools. I want to preface this with there are a million different ways to do cause analysis, maybe not a million. There's a lot of different ways to perform cause analysis. These are just 4 that we're going to go over in this short webinar. So we're going to look at the Fishbone or Ishikawa diagram, the most common cause analysis technique, 5 whys, because it's the easiest one to do. We'll look at failure mode and effects analysis, or FMEA, and then we'll look at Pareto charting. So our Fishbone diagrams is the first tool that we're going to go over. They're good for product design and quality control to show where factors in a process have or potentially can cause problems or issues. They're very easy to use. The diagram maps the causes of issues to assist in identifying actions to resolve the issues or gaps or problems. It is called a fishbone diagram because it looks like a fish skeleton with the symptom or problem at the head of the fish and the causes categorized on the bones of the fish. It's a tool often used in cause analysis because it identifies the effects of different categories on an undesired outcome. It can also be used to reach a desired outcome through the same process, so it can be a preventive tool as well. Again, other names for the fishbone diagram are the Ishikawa diagram, named after its inventor, or a cause and effect diagram. The intent is to identify causes to mitigate the effects through correction and corrective action. So the name cause and effect diagram makes sense. There are a variety of different categories that can be used when developing a fishbone diagram. A few of them are 6 M's, 8 P's, and 4 S's. The categories are used to identify potential causes of a problem, to organize the potential causes, and determine the overall effect of the causes on the problem. This also allows actions or solutions to be targeted at these specific categories. I do want to stop here and take a second to explain something. Again, with the 9001 standard, when it was updated in 2015, it went from root cause analysis to just cause analysis. And this was done intentionally because it was understood that there's not necessarily one cause to a problem. It could be a multitude of causes. And that's one thing that we see here in this fishbone diagram. I'll show you an example. And then I'll go back to that slide. In this fishbone diagram, there are lots of different causes on this fishbone that could be addressed with correction and corrective action in order to prevent the problem from occurring again. We'll come back to this in a second. Just want to go over the different categories. So I mentioned there's 6 M's, 8 P's, and 4 S's. Those are listed here. And again, this is just a way to categorize different causes in different categories in order to assist with those corrections and corrective actions. And I'll just let you read through that. The different categories can be used interchangeably. You don't have to use the 6 M's or the 4 S's or the 8 P's, but I do encourage you, if you're going to do a fishbone diagram, to define those categories ahead of time so that you can come up with those causes for those categories and not the other way around. So again, this is a fishbone diagram. I made it look like a fish. This one's a fancy fish here. And so all of the different causes in the categories, from measurement, a material, a machine, method, Mother Nature, and manpower, are all listed here. Now, we'll take a note that the problem here is too many defects. That's a pretty broad problem. So when you're looking at doing a cause analysis, you want to have a very good understanding of what the problem is. So to just say too many defects, the individuals participating in this cause analysis may not understand what that means, and you probably want to define it better, saying there are too many defects in the production area that creates the blades. We're seeing a rise in defects. We want to evaluate why. So that really, you need to have something a little more specific than just too many defects. So the next one we're going to look at is 5 whys. I said this is one of the most commonly used alongside the fishbone diagram because it's easy. So we're all used to asking why. If you have young children, they ask why a lot. So 5 whys is used as a very simple tool to get to the cause. You ask why to get to that cause. Your first response is typically just a symptom, and that's why you want to continue to ask why until you get to the cause. I do want to note that you can branch off into multiple why streams. So your 5 why may turn into a 5 why with 3 streams of 5 whys. So you have 15, 25 whys because you have several different causes that you're evaluating. 5 whys can also be used with the fishbone diagram. Once you've identified the causes or potential causes on your fishbone diagram, then you can say, well, why does that occur? And when you answer that question, you ask, why does that occur again? One of the more complex cause analysis tools is the Failure Mode and Effects Analysis tool, or FMEA. And this is commonly used in the pharmaceutical industry. So in FMEA, we identify potential failures, their consequences, and their causes, and then we assign a severity, the occurrence rate, and detection ratings. You also identify the current controls that are in place to prevent each type of failure that you identify. Often FMEA is used as a preventive tool rather than a reactive tool, but it can be used when you're looking at problems or nonconformities that have occurred. But it's also used in that risk-based thinking mindset where we're looking at what could go wrong ahead of time and making sure that we have the adequate controls in place. So this is just a simple FMEA table. There's a lot of different ones and how they look, but just to show you that, you're writing down what is the process and then thinking about what can go wrong. If this is a reactive exercise, you would say, what did go wrong? What are the effects of that? So there's too many defects. What are the effects of having too many defects? What is the negative implications for the organization? And then here you put the causes of the failure. And then how can that failure be detected? So are there controls in place? Is quality control checks in place? That sort of thing. Then S is for severity. So how bad is it? If it did occur, how bad would it be? O is for occurrence. How often does it occur? And D is for detection. How well can you detect that problem? And then RPN is risk priority number, and that is gathered from the S, the O, and the D using a little bit of multiplication to get to that number. So I want to show you some of the scores here so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about when I'm saying severity, occurrence, and detection. And again, this is just one example. If you were to Google FMEA risk categories or definitions of risk or scores, there's a ton of different ways to do it. And it really depends on the problem that you're looking at and the context of your organization. So if you look here for severity and occurrence and detection, we've put some definitions around this. So the severity, if it was a severity of 3, it was a management system failure. And here it says incorrect results reported. This is a table from one of our testing laboratory facing trainings that I pulled into this webinar. So that's why it says that. If you look at occurrence, when we've got a 1, it's expected to occur less than 10% of the time. And then for detection, you have 1, 2, and 3, where you've got a good system in place. You've got a system, but it could be improved, or there's no way to detect that failure. And the last tool that I want to look at just briefly is Pareto charts. This is a histogram or a bar chart with a line graph overlaid onto it. You list out your failures by categories. Your frequency is in decreasing order, and you do a cumulative percentage on the far left, from left to right. Let me show you some examples so you get what I'm saying in my words. So if you look here on this number of complaints in the upper right-hand side of the screen, it says hotel complaints. So it's delay in registration, cleaning, room cleaning, food quality. You can see the ones that occur most are on the left-hand side of the graph, going down to the ones that occur least. And then there's a cumulative percentage in that line going up all the way to 100%. And the idea behind Pareto charting is again, this is reactive. It could also be proactive in putting some preventive actions in place. But the idea here is that 80% of your problems are caused by 20% of your issues. So you're going to look at this and draw a line at 80%, where we've got it on the bottom right hand with the purple. You draw a line at 80%, and where that intersects with that cumulative percentage, you draw a line downward, and then you show that you're going to look at all of those symptoms or causes that occur to the left of that line. So if we were to look at this hotel complaints, 80% drawn down means that food quality, room cleaning, and delay in registration cause the majority of our complaints if we were a hotel. So we would want to look at those and do cause analysis on those to come with corrective actions to try to eliminate those issues. Now, when we're looking at hotel complaints, probably you're going to always have complaints, but it's just one way to evaluate the information that you have at hand and to determine what causes issues in your organization and to be able to do some proactive cause analysis to reduce those issues that are occurring. So now that we've gone over the tools, let's just talk about some of the potential causes. This in there, potential causes related to. So these are some of the potential causes that are related to nonconformities that can happen. So we look at inputs, which are customer requirements. Regardless of what you do as an organization, if it's internal or external customers, you have requirements that your customers expect. So you're looking at those inputs. You think about people skills, which is training, planning, which goes into design and development, and validation and verification. We look at our equipment. What standards do we use for the equipment? What procedures do we use? And then we go down to policies, methods, and procedures, any consumables that we're using, and outputs like reports and records. Let's see. Let's go to the next one here. So I mentioned earlier that you do your cause analysis in order to put correction and corrective action into place. And these two words mean different things. Correction means to fix something right away, to stop it from happening. So if you're a testing laboratory and you get a failed result, you stop testing. That's a correction. You stop the testing right then. The corrective action is what is taken after you do some cause analysis. The corrective action is what eliminates the cause of the problem or nonconformity in order for it to not occur again. Correction is done immediately. So let me show you a graphic here. This is one of my favorite graphics that I like to use to compare correction versus corrective action. So here we see there's a body of water to the right, and there's a dam holding the water. Supposedly, it's not doing a very good job of it here. So correction is immediate actions. It prevents, we hope, additional occurrences. Well, no, it takes immediate action, I'm sorry. So the correction here is that this woman has put her finger into the hole in the dam in order to stop the water from going through. One cartoon I used to watch as a kid is, I think it was Daffy Duck, gets to this situation and he's got one wing, the other wing, and both feet trying to hold the water back. So the correction here is to immediately stop the water from flowing. However we can, plug the holes. The corrective action is then to look at why is this dam leaking And what can we do to prevent additional leaks from occurring? So corrective actions are very, very important. Corrections address the symptoms, the water leaking through the dam. Corrective actions address the causes, not the symptoms. So again, both 9001 and 17025 moved away from the term root cause analysis because it's recognized that nonconformities or problems rarely have one distinct cause. And if we limit our analysis to one cause, we could limit the effectiveness of those corrections and corrective actions that are going to be taken. Effective cause analysis is the key to determining actions that yield long-lasting results. Correction and corrective action and preventive action need to address the cause or causes, not just the symptoms. That's why it's very important to perform effective cause analysis so that the nonconformity does not recur or occur elsewhere in your management system or in your operations. So now we're going to get into the relationship between cause analysis and risk-based thinking. If I change the slide for you. So we saw in the requirements for 9001 and 17025 that as part of the corrective action process, we need to update risks and opportunities, and it goes on to say determined during planning. What this means is when you're planning your management system, one of the things that you're supposed to do is address risks and opportunities. So you need to define those risks and opportunities for your organization. So if you identify a risk and then it ends up being a nonconformity a month, 6 months, a year down the road, then the controls that you put into place to minimize that risk may not be effective. So you want to look at those risks and opportunities that you have documented, whether documented on paper or just through your risk assessment process, in order to ensure that your list is up to date. So a nonconformity may occur and it wasn't listed as a risk. So you may want to then add it as a lesson learned to have it on your risk assessment. So again, I just said this, risks and opportunities are not previously identified. The risk was not adequately addressed, and it's a time for learning lessons. So if there is a problem or a nonconformity, wherever it came from in the organization, this is a time for the organization to learn from it, to put corrective actions into place for continual improvement. And then I just want to go over quickly some of these risk-based controls. And this says of ISO IEC 17025-2017, but this can also apply to organizations that only have 9001 for certain areas. Contract review is important if you have customer requirements, to look at your capability, to make sure that you have the processes in place in order to perform whatever your customer is requesting of you. So this is an opportunity for you to identify risks in that area and put actions into place so that you don't get to have a problem or a nonconformity later down the road. Same with process review, where you're selecting your processes. This says verification and validation of methods for testing laboratories, looking at your externally provided products and services, the actual work that you're performing. Here it's testing or calibration. It can also be manufacturing, to take a review of that work and looking at how you ensure quality. And then for all organizations that have management systems, internal audits and corrective actions, that's what we're talking about today. And then non-conforming work, where your response is based on risk. And the reason that I brought this slide in is to start you thinking on the relationship between risk-based thinking and corrective action. Is risk-based thinking is meant to prevent nonconformities from occurring, to prevent problems from happening. So the more robust your risk-based thinking or your risk assessment process is, the likelihood is that you're going to have fewer nonconformities on the back end to have to do cause analysis and corrective action. And I think this next slide shows that. So we look at being reactive versus proactive. So I was just saying, risk-based thinking, you're predicting what could go wrong. You're identifying potential causes of what could go wrong, and you're implementing those preventive actions. So again, the idea here is that you're reducing the likelihood of nonconformities from occurring. Corrective action is reactive. The event has already occurred. The problem's already happened. The organization has already been impacted. We still identify the cause, and then we implement those corrective actions to keep the problem from occurring again. So these can go hand in hand, where you're using your risk assessment approach to prevent nonconformities from occurring. And when they do occur, you're feeding that back into your risk assessment in order to learn that lesson and make sure that it doesn't occur again, and that you have the appropriate controls in place in your management system in order to prevent it from happening again. And then the last slide here that I have is just a list of some potential risks, potential things that could go wrong that relate to an internal context and an external context. People's at the top of the list. Humans are human. We make mistakes. Things happen. Problems occur. So that's one of the things to keep in mind when you're looking at risks or when you're looking at cause analysis when a problem does occur. We already saw the externally provided products and services and the equipment and processes as part of our risk-based controls. And then externally, whatever you're providing to your customer, your reputation, the confidence in the work that you're performing, and there could be financial connotations to that as well. And then again, meeting those requirements, whether our customers are internal or external. We have customer requirements, we have contractual requirements with them, and then also there could be regulatory requirements. So I've said it a couple times in the webinar, we need effective cause analysis. We need to make sure that we're getting to the cause and not just addressing the symptoms. When we actually analyze the cause of a nonconformity or problem, it saves time and money by solving the problem once. We don't have to go back and forth and do this over and over again because the problem keeps occurring over and over again. It ensures that the nonconformity will not recur, and it also can ensure that the nonconformity does not occur elsewhere. And this slide says it ensures it. Well, it's a better chance that it's not going to occur elsewhere if you're using cause analysis, corrective action, and risk-based thinking, all with the mindset of improving your management system and your organization's operations. So my final thought here before we get into some additional resources and questions where I throw it back over to Natalia, there are many ways to perform cause analysis and arrive at the cause or causes of a nonconformity. We only looked at 4 methods and we looked at them very briefly, but there are so many more in order to perform your cause analysis. And sometimes you use a combination of those tools, like I said, using 5Y after you do your fishbone diagram. The analysis method that you choose should be based on the context of your organization and the specific nonconformity being addressed. A one-size-fits-all approach isn't effective in ensuring that nonconformities are controlled, corrected, and that consequences are addressed. So with that, we are going to get into some additional resources. Natalia, do you want to do that, or you want me to, since I'm familiar with it? I'm not hearing anything.
I apologize. I just gave you the presenter back. Please go ahead and
Okay.
you can fix the additional resources while I get the question organized. No problem.
That's great. Yeah. Normally we have external presenters, so we do this part, but Natalia's hosting for me today to do any technical issues in the background. So I'll go ahead and get into this. I have seen a few questions come in, and we'll get to those right after we talk about some of the other resources that we have available to you. So we have many different media to further your understanding of standards, accreditation, management systems, and assessments. On the ANAB website, we have free webcasts on a variety of different topics, including management review and internal audits, do's and don'ts, and things like that. These webcasts are about 5 to 20 minutes long, depending on the topic, and you can view them at any time. ANAB also has a blog page with a wealth of information related to risk, accreditation standards, requirements, and others like new programs that are coming out. We also offer these webinars monthly. The next topic that we are going to do is next month on lessons learned from performing remote assessments and audits. We're doing that in conjunction with another organization, but it will be posted on our website soon. Finally, we offer training in many areas, including internal auditing, standard requirements, risk, cause analysis, and other topics. As with assessments, our training changed significantly with the pandemic and the travel restrictions. So all of our traditional in-person courses have been converted to online versions and include exercises and discussions related to the topics at hand. We also have web-based and self-paced training. So all of these resources can be found on the ANAB website at anab.ansi.org. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Natalia to read your questions.
Perfect, Melanie. Thank you. This was a great presentation. We had a couple of questions come in, and I will get to all of your questions. If additional questions come up, please don't hesitate, put them to Q&A. We have about 15 minutes, so I think we'll have enough time to get a few more addressed if there are any. Okay, Melanie, question number one. I work for a smallish company, approximately 300 employees, with a very young safety culture. I am writing our first incident investigation procedures. Would 5 whys be the best cause analysis tool to introduce to the safety committee for incident investigation?
Well, that's interesting to apply the concepts here to safety, because the 17025 standard specifically doesn't address safety requirements. However, you do need to do cause analysis for safety, and 5 whys is a good way to start. So if you're new to it, it's a really good technique, but I wouldn't write yourself into a corner and say that is the approach we're going to use, because situations are different. So you could use a variety of different techniques and just say, for example, 5 why. One thing that I would encourage you to do, and this is just me, Melanie Ross, encouraging you to do, is to use risk-based thinking to think of what could go wrong, and use that FMEA to identify what controls you have in place or what controls you need to put in place. FMEA works really well for safety-related issues.
Wonderful, thank you. Second question, in relation to Manual 3033, Section 3.1.1, Resolution of Nonconformity Findings, which establishes that the update of each nonconformity identified during the evaluation activity must be provided. Can you give an example or give me more detail on the extension? For internal audit nonconformities, should a deadline be established to implement corrective action?
So I'm going to answer your second question first. Yes, absolutely. A deadline should be established for internal audit nonconformities. Again, it's not a requirement in the standard, but it may be a requirement in your accreditation requirements. But as a good rule of thumb, putting a deadline or a time frame on internal audit findings adds importance to them. It adds an urgency. So if you identify a nonconformity or a problem on an internal audit and you don't set a deadline for it, then it's just going to sit there and not get done. But if you say you need to fix this in 30 days or whatever your time frame is, they put some urgency on it. It's also good to assign it to a specific person or department as well. As far as MA 3033, correct me if I'm wrong, Natalia, I think that's our forensics manual. Yep. So that's for forensics laboratories. And so this is speaking to, I believe, nonconformity findings during your external assessment. And so you do have to provide updates. And that's an internal requirement of ANAB for forensic laboratories only.
Perfect. Thank you, Melanie. Okay, one more question here. Question, is a procedure required for cause analysis?
Good question. So I mentioned the requirements of 3 standards only, 9001, 17025, and 17020. 9001 and 17025 no longer require a procedure for corrective action or cause analysis or for risk-based thinking. There's no requirement for a procedure. A lot of organizations choose to write a procedure, like the question we had before, because it puts some structure to the process. And without a procedure, people don't know what to do. So a lot of organizations do have procedures, even though it's not required. Now, inspection bodies currently have to have a procedure because the standard requires it, 17020. So you just need to be aware of the requirements that are held within your management system to make sure that you're meeting those. But I'm of the opinion that procedures are always better, but don't write yourself in a corner and say every nonconformity we come across, we're going to do FMEA. You'll bog yourself down in analysis paralysis and you won't end up resolving any of the nonconformities.
So there's two questions that followed up from that. Does ISO 9001 require change to your QMS for all corrective actions?
It says, let me actually pull the standard out so I have exactly the wording. I just have it right here next to me. The specific wording that it says is you need to make changes to your quality management system if necessary. I can't think of a time when a nonconformity has occurred in my 20 plus years of doing this that changes to the management system were not necessary. There's always a procedure update or a form modification or additional training that needs to be done, or an entire reboot of a program where you got a nonconformity in your external assessment and you have to create a new vendor qualification program, for instance. So it doesn't require it. It gives you that if necessary. But again, I've never seen an instance where you didn't have to make some sort of change to your management system.
Thank you. Next question. Our company has a procedure in place for continual improvement and a procedure for corrective preventive car part requests. Do you feel those could be combined into one document? We're accountable to both ISO IC 17025 and ISO IC 17020.
I mean, it really depends on what you have in those procedures. If you're saying in your continual improvement procedure that if we come up with an action that we want to take, we need to put it through our preventive action program, then you probably could combine the two. But if it's a completely different process, then it may not make sense to combine them. So really take a look at what I used to like to do when I was a quality manager is, use a process map, take sticky notes of the steps of each process and then overlay the ones that are the same. And if most of them are the same, then you can combine those two procedures into one. Just keep in mind for 17020, you are required to have that corrective action and preventive action procedure. So you would want to make sure that you're still meeting the requirements of 17020 if you were to combine those two procedures.
Great, thank you so much. Next question. Is there a requirement to close corrective actions in a set period of time?
This goes back to the same deadline for internal audit nonconformities. There is no requirement. So I think the 9001 standard used to say in a timely manner, something like that. And I think 17020 still says that, but that language is not there anymore. It's up to the organization to determine what time frame they want to put on their nonconformities. So it really, the sooner the better. If you've identified a problem, the sooner you can understand the cause and put corrective actions into place, the better, because you don't want that problem to occur again. But again, you don't want to paint yourself in a corner and say all nonconformities will be resolved in 30 days, because back to my example, if you have to redo your entire vendor qualification program, it's going to take a little longer than 30 days. But you do want to say we are going to set deadlines, but there is no specific requirement. Now, I will say if you have an external assessor or auditor come in and you've got 100 nonconformities that are just sitting there over the past year and nothing's been done to them, they'll probably write an audit or an assessment nonconformity against that and say, you know, your system is not effective because you're not identifying causes and you're not identifying actions that can be taken to eliminate those causes.
Thank you. In your opinion, is the proactive approach to risk management similar to the preventive action approach?
Absolutely. That is an excellent question, and I'm glad you brought it up because I didn't state it in my talk. But when 17025 and 9001 were updated, preventive action was removed. And what was put in its place is actions to address risks and opportunities. So some of you may relate to this when I say this statement, because I was a quality manager for most of my career. We never did preventive actions. We never thought about what could go wrong and try to address it because we looked at the things that were wrong, right? There weren't a whole lot of them all the time, but so the thought was put in addressing risks and opportunities to get organizations to proactively think about what could go wrong, and then what opportunities are there that they could take, but to kind of make it more of a continual improvement effort than the preventive action of the old standard. Great question.
Excellent. Next question. Are there any literature that I can obtain to get more familiar with the corrective action process and analysis? Is there any training that, I know ANAB offers training, is there any training that could be provided for someone to learn more about these processes?
Absolutely. So I'll start with the second and then go back to the first. So for training, ANAB has a self-paced cause analysis and corrective action course. It is not based on forensics or non-forensics. And then we also offer an instructor-led forensic-specific cause analysis and corrective action course. We are looking at this year, it's actually on my to-do list, of coming up with a comprehensive instructor-led course that is not specific to the forensics industry as well. As far as other resources, again, we've had a lot of other webinars on cause analysis, so you could go take a look at that. But there are also ISO standards that help with cause analysis and corrective action. And one of them that comes to mind that is more for risk assessment is the ISO 31000 series of documents, where it also has IEC 31010. And that is all of the approaches to risk-based thinking or risk assessment. But those approaches are pretty much the same as what you would use for cause analysis. So you could use a lot of those. They get down to the 5 whys all the way through the most complex statistical analysis you could do of data you have about nonconformities. So it can get overwhelming, but there are a lot of different good resources out there.
Thank you so much. I think that's it for our questions. We are actually about 4 minutes ahead of time. I'll give you another moment. If anybody has any questions, type them in. On that note, thank you so much for joining. I see another question about PowerPoint presentation. We do not send out PowerPoint presentations, but we will have a recording of this webinar posted on our website. Probably within a week or so, that you can go back and take a look. And as Melanie mentioned, if you're interested in looking at any other webinars, they're also available on our website. Please go ahead and visit it. No other questions. Okay, if you think of any questions after this webinar, training related, please email to training@anab.org. For anything else related, such as accreditation services, ANAB@anab.org, and it's okay if you mix those addresses up because we will get you to the right person and answer any questions you may have. On that note, thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day, evening, or night, and hopefully we'll see you in about a month.
Yeah, thanks everybody.